Hi, and welcome to It Figures. Tonight I'm going to be taking a look at Ratchet and Clank Future. Okay, the first figure here is actually going to be of Ratchet and Clank, and this is an official licensed product of the PlayStation 3, as you can see. And these figures are made by DC Unlimited. The packaging here is kind of boring, actually. It's a blister pack, which I do not like. There's no way of getting inside of this packaging unless you cut up the entire package to get inside. On the back you do have some artwork and a couple of pictures of the other figures in the line. So for the most part, it's pretty boring packaging. So let's get this thing open and take a look at Ratchet and Clank. Inside the packaging, everything, as you can see, is held in by twisty ties, which again, I'm not a real big fan of. After unboxing him, I noticed right away that he has a lot more articulation than I was expecting. But first, let's get into the detail and the paint job. As you can see, they did a great job with his hair. As you can see, almost every individual hair strand on his head. I also really like his expression here. It's quite nice. And his large eyes, really well painted. There's no slop or overspray or anything on this figure. His suit here is also really well done. Some exceptional detail here on the shoulder pads, and on the back, as you can see, a little, almost looks like a little nut here, which is quite nice. That's where Clank sits. Did a great job on his gloves, all the way down to the very little bolts here that hold them together. It's very nice. And the detail continues even in his shoes. As you can see, just really nice detail on the outside of the shoe, and even on the inside of the shoe. Some very, very good detail here. And he does have a tail, which again was really well sculpted. Looks great. Okay, so let's take a look at the articulation on Ratchet here. His head is ball jointed, which means you can move it pretty much in any direction. Though it doesn't really move far in each direction, it moves just enough to where, you know, it's a decent ball jointed head there. Now his shoulders are also ball jointed, which can pretty much move in any direction. And from the packaging, it didn't look like his elbows bend, but they did a really nice job of hiding that. So yeah, his arms do bend at the elbows, and his wrists turn, and his waist also turns. His feet, or his knees, don't bend. He does have straight legs, which is kind of weird since he has so much articulation everywhere else. However, his feet do turn. They're not ball jointed or anything, but they do turn. And his tail just moves back and forth, so you can kind of get it out of the way if you want to. And it's hard plastic, so it doesn't really move anywhere but back and forth. Okay, now let's take a look at one of my favorites in the series, which is Clank. Now, I guess you could call Clank an accessory with this, even though he is technically another main character of the show, or the video game. But he was kind of packaged like an accessory, so I'll just call Clank an accessory with this package. He doesn't have as much articulation as Ratchet does. His arms do move, and you have to be kind of careful because everything's so thin here. They're not ball jointed, but they just move back and forth. And his feet do kind of move back and forth, but not great. But they do pop in and out. That's what this bolt here on his back is. You push them up, and they kind of go up a little bit, but not too much. and you pull the bolt down and his feet come out. It doesn't work too great, but it works for what it is. His head does turn, and I don't think it's on a ball joint. It just turns back and forth, basically. But one good touch on this is his mouth does open and close. So I very much like that. So the detail here on Clank is just as good as it was on Ratchet, down to his hands, as you can see, to all the bolts on him and everything. And there's not a whole lot of detail to even put on him, really. Under his arms here, you can see there's a little bit more detail on each side. I kind of wish his stomach would open and have some cool stuff in it, like the game, but it doesn't. But Ratchet is really a cool little accessory figure, and of course you have to have him if you have Ratchet. Now for the actual accessories, Ratchet comes with his wrench. As anyone who's played the game will know what this is. It's his wrench that he has throughout the entire game. This is really a solid plastic. I mean, you can't really bend it too hard. I figured it'd be more like rubbery, but it's not. It's really good, solid plastic, really well made. There isn't any coloring except for silver, as you can see on here. But like everything else, the detail is pretty decent. It's not an incredible accessory, but it's one that he has to have. It's pretty well done. The other accessory that Ratchet comes with is a gun. Now this is where it kind of disappoints me a little bit. Not that the gun is bad, is the fact that if you've played Ratchet and Clank, you realize that Ratchet has a ton of weapons, and really cool looking weapons in the game. Some are just really outrageously huge, crazy looking weapons, and this is the only weapon that came with him. And instead of giving him like one of the cooler weapons, we get this, which is not a bad weapon. I mean, as you can see, the detail here is just fantastic. Every part of this thing is detailed down to the handle, the trigger, everything. I mean, it's a really, really cool looking gun. I just wish that they would have came out with a lot more rather than just the single gun. However, the gun itself, is great, so don't get me wrong. I just wish they would have came with like 5 or 6 different choices. The gun does fit perfectly into his hand as well. Looks great while he's holding it. The wrench also fits great in his other hand. It's not loose, and it looks really good with him holding it just like the gun. Okay, as I said before, there is a little bolt here on back of Clank to attach him to the back of Ratchet. So let's go ahead and put him in there and see how well it works. Yeah, works great. He sets right in there for no problem whatsoever. Now he has Clank as his backup. Okay, so let's bring up the Figometer and see how Ratchet stacks up. For detail and paint, he is flawless. Ratchet and Clank gets a 5 out of 5. Articulation, again, I was like super impressed by this. A 5 out of 5. Accessories, if you want to include Clank as an accessory, and the wrench and the gun, absolutely great accessories here. A 5 out of 5. A couple more weapons would have been nice, but I can live with what it came with. DC Direct did an absolutely incredible job with this figure. No complaints at all with it. He's an absolute must-buy if you are into video game figures or just Ratchet and Clank by himself. That was tonight's review for Ratchet and Clank. I will see you next time on It Figures.